Hello. In this video, I want to talk about Saturn return, but also Saturn transits, one in particular when it crosses the ascendant, because the two are very similar in their flavor, in their invitation. In fact, I would even say they're identical in the invitation, not in the actual experience, because the experience of your Saturn return or your Saturn crossing, or when I say the experience of transiting Saturn crossing your ascendant will be very different based on your own chart and signs and any aspects it will be making and all that. So, but in essence, those two are the same in that they're the invitation to go into our own, to descend into our own underground, which is essentially shadowlands or shadow work, for us to be doing shadow work, right? But there's more to that. And I also want to sort of illustrate this by bringing in the great metaphor to use when, on those two occasions, right, Saturn return and Saturn crossing your ascendant, and that is the myth of Persephone, and particularly the piece that she's dragged into hell, right, or rather underworld. Well, it's the same thing in mythology, but also in real life, right? Our shadowlands are not particularly pleasant places necessarily. And the dragging, the abduction of Persephone, is a metaphor for us, for life, I suppose, in the way that no one, walks into their hell, personal hell. This is only personal hell, right? Personal underworld, like with a skipping their step, singing la 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 along the way, right? Like can't wait to get down. And so usually, typically, we do kick and scream, we do drag our feet, we really resist with all our might to go into our underworld, to face all that wants to be faced, but it's not going to be pleasant to begin with. It's always just to begin with. The difficulties at the start. So that's the metaphor: Persephone being abducted and dragged, sorry, into the underworld. Another piece about the myth, an important metaphor to bear in mind, is that this was an abduction from her mother and her idyllic girlhood and childhood and a naive and virgin-like, intact, innocent child, right? Childlike quality that she was while before the underworld, right? And so that's the piece about growing up, a piece about having to leave our parents' home, and all the trauma that comes with that. It's not so much, well, it is the trauma of Persephone, but it's the trauma of the mother, who is on the other side of that underworld, kicking and screaming herself that she cannot bear to lose her daughter. And yet that's a mother story that important if you're a mother, or if this is you can this is you and your mother. You need to understand that her kicking and screaming is her own shadow, or rather her grief at a loss. Now, of course, in the story, she doesn't know what happened to her, so if it's a literal loss that the Persephone died, of course, I mean, that would be, a natural response to the loss of a child. But this loss is a natural loss. It's a phase in the child's or woman's development, growth. She's never going to become a woman unless she moves away from the mother and outgrows her mother, and that's natural, right? So, but the mother will have a sense of a loss. So that's the metaphor there is not to say that that's okay, that reaction of mother is just to have compassion, understanding why that is, but it's actually the mother's shadow. She's working through her own shadow of her attachment to the daughter. And yeah, so at the end of the Persephone round in the underworld, and when the deal is made that she actually spends some time with the mother, far less than in the underworld, thankfully, because no, actually she does do it the other way around. Okay, so that was my own personal preference there, seeping through. But there was a negotiation, and there was a decision that she will live in both worlds, because she's both a daughter and has a healthy connection with the mother, or renegotiated connection and contract with her mother, with her parents. So this is the Cancer piece about the opposition to Saturn, right? Cancer moon. Those are the archetypes of Demetri, um, the mother of Persephone, right? And and so it's the piece about, like, now it's renegotiated the contract, and she can still be a grown up while being with the mother, and then she goes back to her life as a fully grown up woman without the mother in her life. And it's with her husband, and it's with her own domain, which is the Pluto underworld. Her husband, right, is Pluto in this myth, right? And so that's the story of Saturn return. But that's the start of the story. So whether it's the Saturn is crossing your ascendant or it's meeting your own Saturn, your natal Saturn, that's the point of the abduction of Persephone, or you. You are now plunged into your own underworld. And I often say, when I talk about this, say the lights go off. Like, I always remember that so starkly in my own life. Literally, the world became like sepia. Like, everything lost its lacklusterness and all the, sunny shine and boldness and brightness, right? It literally just completely was like a black and white mute movies before the sound. So, and so the work of one's Saturn return or one's crossing over the ascendant, and both, you could have both, because you have Saturn on your ascendant or in the first house, so it's like the same, really, it's not just shadow work, it's far more specific. It's the invitation and the call and the task. So Saturn is a taskmaster, so you have been tasked to master your Saturn. So now, this is a tricky one, because with Saturn, it's never about the end goal. The end with Saturn is death. What this means is, because death in the physical, literal sense, it's like the end of the physical world. That's what Saturn is. So the mastery of Saturn is not about the end goal, because the end goal is death with mastery of Saturn and just mastery of life and just life, right? The mastery is mastering how to work with Saturn. And eventually you master your Saturn. And that's probably, I can't speak of that yet, second Saturn return, but I will be when that happens for me in the next 7 years. I'll have my own second Saturn return. So the point with Saturn return or Saturn crossing your ascendant is that you're invited to focus on your Saturn. Now, of course, you have the whole chart and you always are working with your whole chart. But you will notice as the time goes on, time being another Saturn word, that what's missing, that piece that's nagging at you, that's making you feel my life is not the way I wanted it to be, my life is not as beautiful or as meaningful or as satisfying or as successful as I was hoping, right? As I hoped when it will make me feel happy, right? So there will be that nagging piece, and that is, you will notice, it will be always about your Saturn, because that is what we're here to do, really. Like, to do, right? To actually intentionally work with. Other stuff is to work almost against, if you like, or like stuff by stuff, I mean other planets. Or we are just compelled when it's transpersonal, like Pluto, Neptune, and then we work with what's been done, right? Like what the consequences of all the other planets, we then end up working with that, and that's another piece of shadow work. But with Saturn, it's like we have to like sit every day and do the homework of Saturn, whatever our Saturn is, the sign, the house, the aspects. So as an astrologer, but also not as just an astrologer, that's kind of my weaker identity. I'm a shadow worker first and foremost, and this is just the language I use to do my shadow work and to just make sense of life. So if you're like this, and if you're watching this, your invitation isn't to become an astrologer. It's just to study your own Saturn and to understand what it wants from you. And to also remember that with Saturn, the mastery, it's like, don't expect this to be a job done tomorrow. The only job that you're asked to do is to sit with it every day or every week or every month. I mean, but the more frequent, the better. Again, obviously, it doesn't have to be set in stone, obviously, but it's, and you will be doing it whether you like it or not, whether you're even aware of it or not. And you will notice, like I say, that you keep going back to the themes of your Saturn in whatever you have it. In Aquarius, if you're currently going through a Saturn return, or any other sign, right? You will keep going back to those themes, because that's the only work that will, doing our Saturn work is the only work that will make us feel like we have lived a meaningful life. Why? Because when we just think of any situation in your life where you kind of had to work harder, not like the toil or the drudgery of some kind of corporate office 9 to 5 job that's like soul sapping. No, no. I mean the work that actually, like, I don't know if you're into gym or fitness or something, but you actually enjoy it, right? I mean, or you at least you don't hate it, right? It's the point. The reason I'm trying to make this distinction is because you need to learn to love this work. And so, whatever metaphor, I can be spending time here trying to think of the best metaphor for that kind of work. But so, I'm just going to say that it's whatever your Saturn is asking you to do, you need to first and foremost learn to find meaning and satisfaction in doing that work. So, the results will be eventually showing, and you'll be reaping the rewards of that work. And yeah, maybe already at your Saturn return, if you've been doing this work and you're aware of all of this, but certainly by the second Saturn return, I imagine, as I can already feel that in my own self, right? So the key is to find joy, beauty, satisfaction, meaning in doing that Saturn work. And I really think after 52 plus years on this planet, and okay, maybe only just 30 or so, living astrologically and thinking astrologically, I really, and observing the world and making sense of it through astrology, I really think it's our Saturn that it's at the root of all of our dissatisfaction, of our sense of meaninglessness. And it's only because that with only with Saturn we have that opportunity to feel like, wow, I've done all this, I've achieved all this, I've made this happen, I've succeeded at that. And this could be, doesn't at all mean that it has to be success in terms of your public persona, your public vocation or your career or your profession. This could be as personal as, like in my case, to master my own body and weight, for instance, is my own personal Saturn in Taurus. And it's not going to be, I mean, it will be maybe visible, but that's not my work necessarily. But it's also like if you have it in the 12th house, or you have it in below the horizon already. So this kind of work will be something that it's maybe only known to you more personally, than to anyone else. It will always manifest outside, because that's just, that's just the laws of Saturn, also our 3D reality. But my point is, it will not necessarily be your career, or which is kind of often what's associated with Saturn and 10th house. So just remember that as well. This is your own work. Mastery of yourself, mastery of your life is achieved through mastering your Saturn. And this mastering is not about like, okay, I'm gonna master it by the end of this year. No, it's mastering your how you're gonna enjoy, how you're gonna make this work feel like soulful to you, feel like it's nourishing and supportive of yourself and your growth and your development or your evolution, right? And that's it. So hopefully this was helpful. And if you are in the middle of Saturn return, happy Saturn return.